Hello, good morning. I am glad I could be with you to celebrate this International Women's Day and to worship our great God. My name is Michaela Iiames, and with my husband, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina in the U.S. And we have a very special place in our hearts for the Sofia Church, and we look forward to the next time we can be together in person. I want to extend a special thank you for giving support to Dima and Marina as they bear the emotional burden of their care and concern for their friends and families in the Ukraine, especially in Kharkiv. I can't imagine how that burden feels, but I know your hugs and prayers help them to carry that weight, so please continue. The theme of this year's International Women's Day is gender equality. And this morning, we've been specifically talking about stereotypes. And I know you've already been primed with a definition of what stereotypes are. But as a review, and to make sure we're on the same page, I wanted to include a definition that I found. So a stereotype is a widely held judgment about a person or group, even though it's overly simplified and not always accurate. What I hope to do this morning is to share about common gender stereotypes that we have and include a commentary on whether they are harmful or helpful. I'd like to transition from there to talk about stereotypes we may have about the nature of God. Perhaps you'll be surprised to realize that gender stereotypes can impact the way that we view God, the God of the Bible. And finally, I'll close with a story of how God in the flesh, Jesus, transformed the life of a woman because of his willingness to challenge some of the stereotypes of his culture. So let's begin. Most of us are familiar with typical gender stereotypes. So, for example, for young children, girls like to play with dolls and boys like to play with trucks or guns. Girls like girly colors like pink and yellow, while boys like blues and browns and blacks. For school-age kids, girls are better at reading and boys are better at math or science. Girls are more creative and boys are better at logic. And then as we get older, maybe as adults, you've heard women who are assertive are bossy. Women are natural nurturers, where men are natural leaders. Devoted moms are less competent at their job. Women are too emotional to hold positions of leadership or to do jobs such as pilots or doctors or bankers. For sure, this is not a comprehensive list of the variety of gender stereotypes in our culture. And I'm sure there are others within your culture in Bulgaria that I'm not familiar with, but that you can relate to. The tough part about this topic is that it only takes a moment for us to think of a person who fits these stereotypes. I think about my own family, for example. I tend to be more of a nurturer and homemaker than my husband. But I'm also the one who tends to deal with the finances. And I'm a science teacher. And I would say we're both fairly emotional. I wouldn't say that I'm the more emotional of the two of us. So when is applying these stereotypes harmful? Have you thought about that? Do you recognize some that you have about others or about yourself? Very briefly, I think it's when these stereotypes create a box that defines the boundaries of what we think a person can or can't do, or defines a nature that is static or unchanging. According to Monica Williams from the Momentous Institute, even positive stereotypes, like boys are more athletic or girls are more understanding, can create pressures for those individuals to perform in a certain way that's not maybe their authentic self. Brene Brown, who is an American researcher on shame, vulnerability, and leadership, addresses this idea of dealing with our authentic self. And she said, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. In other words, it's almost as if to be authentic, we need to identify those stereotypical ways of viewing ourselves that maybe don't define us and think about who we really are. I encourage you to take time to think about how you might put yourself or others in boxes based on stereotypes rather than allowing them and allowing yourself to experience the freedom that comes with authenticity. Similarly, it's become a conviction of mine that we do the same thing when considering the nature of God. We tend to view him in ways that may be more stereotypical than you think. Close your eyes for a second and imagine God. Okay, close your eyes. Do you see a face? Do you see a figure? Is there an action involved? Okay, open your eyes. Who did you see? Was it a grandfatherly figure? Was he smiling? Scowling? Did he have a neutral expression? What are some of the attributes that you would assign to the God that you pictured? Strong, powerful, commanding, judgmental? Did you see God as a woman? Did you picture God smiling? Was he singing? Was God cradling someone as a woman cradles an infant at her breast? Have you put God in the same kind of box that limits your experience of him? Let's open our Bibles together and look at Isaiah 49. I'm going to go over a few scriptures that specifically highlight parts of God's character that perhaps we haven't considered before. Okay, so in Isaiah 49, verse 15, the scriptures say, "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." So this is God comparing his love as even more than a woman who has just had a child. Look over in Psalm 22. And as you're getting there, I'm going to refer to a lot of scriptures, and at that point I'll ask you just to list them because I don't think we have the time for you to flip back, forth to these scriptures. Psalm 22, verse 9 to 10 says, "Yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast upon you. From my mother's womb, you have been my God." So God describes himself here as a midwife, as the one who helps another woman have a baby. Several times, and this is where I'm just going to ask you to write these down, several times God describes himself as a mother bird, shielding the young from danger under her wing. That would be Deuteronomy 32, verse 11, and in the New Testament, Luke 13, verse 34. I did a study several years ago about to challenge the stereotype that I had made God into, which was I put him in a box of not having strong emotional attachments to us. And that was really difficult for me because I didn't get the sense that God was feeling what I felt. And there was a disconnect for me. I had definitely put him in a box. And so I want to just read a few scriptures. And for this, I'm just going to ask you to listen and maybe write down the scripture. But this is Zephaniah 3, verse 17 says, "He will take great delight in you, in his love. He will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." So I think about that, like God taking great delight in me. Another one, Jeremiah 31:3. "I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfading kindness." And in the Message, another version of the Bible, it says, God told them, "I've never quit loving you and never will. Expect love, love, and more love." I just think that's so incredible that God, there's no limit to his love for us. And lastly, this scripture in Psalm 86 about this topic, verses 5 and 6 says, "You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call on you. Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I am in distress, I call to you, because you answer me." So for me, I went through all the emotional language of God in the Bible, and it completely tore apart this stereotype that I had made of God. First of all, I gave him attributes that are typical male, judgmental and harsh and unemotional, really. And what I found was completely different. God had characteristics that were typically female, that were their kindness and motherly love and compassionate, things that I just didn't attribute to God. And so I am so grateful that that box that I had put around God and his character and his nature and his emotions towards me, I was so grateful that the scriptures basically blew that away. And I hope that encourages some of you who might need to do those same things, that you pursue a study like that. But now I want to go into God in the flesh, and that is Jesus. And a story that many of us are very familiar with in John chapter 4. And John chapter 4, I want to read the story about the Samaritan woman. And for those of you who are not aware, in Jesus's time, Samaria was an area of the land in which Jesus lived that the Jews, the Orthodox Jews, didn't venture into that area because the Samaritans were people who had kind of strayed in their ways in following God. And so they were considered polluted people. They weren't pure Jews. And many Jews would walk around the area of Samaria in order just not even to get their feet on the same soil as a Samaritan. So there were a lot of, as we can imagine, stereotypes about these people. Like they were all a certain way. Also in that time period, there was a lot of gender stereotypes, similar to what we have today, but even more so, where men in public just did not communicate with women. Women were looked at equal to dogs in the society. And so I love how in this story, Jesus just blows those stereotypes away. And so we'll begin reading, and I won't read the whole thing, but I hope you read it later. I just want to hit a couple highlights. But in John chapter 4, it says in verse 7, "When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, 'Will you give me a drink?' His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew. I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." So here's God in the flesh, blowing apart a stereotype. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." And so he invites her into a conversation about God. And I just think that's so incredible that that's God in the flesh, and that's who our God is. He is inviting us into a dialogue. And so she had a little trouble getting started, but they have this dialogue. And then he said, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she said. And Jesus said, "You're right when you said you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see you are a prophet." So he essentially understood the things going on in her life. Here was a woman, and in that society, a woman did not have the power to get a divorce. It was a man who had that power. And so we don't know exactly why she had so many husbands. My guess is because divorces were granted to men so easily for things like the woman cooking his food wrong or not picking up after him as he would like her to do. It was really, really easy to get a divorce. So my thought is that this woman was really treated terribly in the society. And, you know, life happens, difficulties happen in our life, and the God that we see here is a God who understands that. Later on, in verse 25, the woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." And I wanted to point out here, she essentially had a stereotypical view of what the Messiah would look like. And Jesus didn't fit that box that she had put him into. And so she didn't even recognize that this was God in the flesh. And so then Jesus declared, "I who speak to you am he." And so he revealed himself to her. And later on it says, verse 28, "Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, 'Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ?' And they came out of the town and made their way toward him." So it just amazes me. Well, I guess now it doesn't amaze me, but the reaction of this woman, and I think for you and me, when we are able to overlook these stereotypes, break out of them, not only the way we view ourselves, but also how we view other people, it creates this freedom, this energy, this excitement about the possibilities. So I want you to have a few takeaways as we close here. Regarding yourself, have you considered ways you view yourself based on how you're supposed to be? I want you to take some time to consider that in this coming week. Are there ways that you need to break out of that? How about regarding others? Do you impose views on other people that put them in a box and limit them? It could be someone within your own household or your friendship circle. And regarding God, have you put God in a box that limits your ability to fully experience the kind of relationship He wishes to have with you? I am so grateful that you've allowed me a moment to share with you guys. I love you tremendously. I hope these things that I've shared have really challenged you as well as encouraged your heart. And I hope I've given you a little bit of homework that's going to inspire you to find out more about the nature of God. I love you. Bye.